excited for this next interview. Wanted to talk to someone about leaving a playing career and finding your feet outside the field, but also about one of the most exciting stories around North American soccer, and that is the launch of Charlotte FC, the new expansion team in MLS coming up next year. So who better than the Director of Business Operations, Darrius Barnes, of course, former Revolution legend as well. Darrius, thanks for joining us.
Dave, thanks for having me. Happy to be on, and looking forward to the conversation. You're doing some good stuff over here, so I really appreciate you having me on.
So let's start here. You're playing professional soccer. At what point from when you start your pro career, or maybe even in college, do you start thinking, what else am I going to do with my life?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. It's a loaded question. I feel like you're always taught growing up, right, to start planning out your next step, and don't put all your eggs in one basket, all those cliche things. But when you're playing, you're like extremely invested, and putting all your being into playing and doing everything you can to to be the best that you can be. And for me, that was it. I grew up playing soccer. I just the game kind of found me, and I gravitated towards the game just at a very young age. Started playing when I was 5 years old in the Triangle area. Never really had aspirations to play professionally. It was just something that I enjoyed doing and something that I was good at, and it was my escape. And so, fast forward a couple years, started to develop and get better. Started to gauge some interest, obviously, winning youth tournaments and getting some accolades and things of that sort. And I was fortunate enough to get a scholarship to Duke University. And honestly, even then, I didn't really have aspirations to play pro, or thought that I could. Yeah, it was just, it wasn't really till after my freshman year that I started to have that thought that I could go pro. I had a really good freshman year at Duke. And after the season, our assistant coach came to me and said that there had been some interest from MLS teams, and asked did I ever think about coming out early. And by no means did I ever want to come out early. It was very important for me to get my education. My parents instilled that in me at an early age, so that never crossed my mind twice. So, but when he mentioned that kind of got the wheels turning that I had a chance to play pro. So, really from that off season forward, I kind of did everything I could to put myself in a position to go pro. And so that meant taking summer school and graduating from Duke early, just understanding the schedule of when the MLS season starts. To if you're fortunate enough to get drafted, preseason starts in January. And so in order to put myself in the best position, I wanted to make sure I graduated from Duke early, which was a sacrifice. And luckily I had a great 4-year career at Duke, and was fortunate to get drafted by New England Revolution, and that's kind of where things took off. But really from there, I was just focused on playing. I wasn't really thinking about what was next. Had a good rookie year with New England, and so all my eggs are in the basket of being the best professional that I can be. But if I could go back, I probably would have started thinking about kind of post playing a little bit earlier. Mm-hmm. Just knowing what was to come, in terms of, good years, bad years, just understanding the roller coaster ride it is of, being a professional athlete and injuries and things of that sort. And so you definitely want to make sure you have, plans A, B, C kind of subsequently like following each other, and making sure you're keeping your options open.
I assume the moment you realized you could go pro was when you found out you could stay in front of Mike Grella, right? Once you play with him, then you can hang with the big boys.
And I mean, you're not wrong. Mike Grell's he's one of the best players I've ever played against. And me and him, we used to have battles in practice, and there was a lot of chirping going on, a lot of smack talk going on. We had some chippy days in practice, but I like to think that I made him better, and he definitely made me better going against someone of that caliber day in and day out.
He is a legend and a comedian at the same time.
Yeah.
But you mentioned you wish you had started thinking about this earlier. So in your playing career, you were with the Revs for over 7 seasons. I think at what point did you start thinking about this? And was there any mechanism in place in the league or with the Revs at the time where, people came to you and said, what's your thought process after your playing career?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. What I would say is just that, it wasn't really till I got an injury, a substantial injury, that I started to think about what was next, because in this league, there aren't too many, long-term contracts, and contracts can be very much here today, gone tomorrow type ordeals. And so In 2015, I tore my patellar tendon, and so that gave me a lot of time to really just, I was just rehabbing, really start to develop, the mental side of my game and, my mental capacity and figuring out just how to be mentally tough and, what I wanted to do post playing wise. And so, I started to look at everything from studying for the GMAT and, applying to business school to exploring different, just career routes, whether it be, in banking, what jobs there were in sports, within soccer, just ideating all up and down the board. And so that's really when I started to think about, what was next in my journey. And luckily, I was able to come back from the injury. I played 8 seasons for New England. And then, after my contract with New England, I played 1 year for the New York Cosmos. And that's really when I started to think about it a little bit more. I knew 2017 with the Cosmos, that was going to be my last year. Just knowing I wanted to get into something else, and I had fulfilled a childhood dream of mine, a lifelong dream to play professionally. But it was time to try something else, and I didn't want to be 38, 39 before I'm getting some real business experience. Mm-hmm. And so that was really where I started to take informational interviews and meet with different people, and you really start to see that some of your past experiences kind of lead up to where you are. Like, you asked me, if were there any resources in place, specifically, I would say no. There wasn't, a roadmap, right, or, programming from a league standpoint at that point in time to prep players when they're done playing. But, even just from like player appearances that I did with corporate sponsors, as a player, media obligations. I remember, I think 2014 World Cup, the Revs and their local broadcast partner had me and someone else kind of break down and analyze games and do like post-match reviews. And so those were things, like different experiences that I took that, I was able to make applicable to when I was able to transition, just giving me exposure and experience in different arenas within the game, but outside the game at the same time. So to answer your question, is yes, but no. There wasn't anything kind of official like there is now, which I think it's fantastic. Just the great work that, MLS Player Engagement Group is doing right now with, Jamil Northcutt and his team, just providing programming for, academy players, current players, and, MLS greats, and giving them, options and resources and experience. So when they're done playing, that transition's a little bit easier, because it's definitely a tough transition when you decide to hang up the boots, and the more resources and people you can have in your corner, the better. So, for me, I just, tried to figure it out as best as I could, and, did everything people tell you to do in terms of networking and, just, kind of humbling yourself and bringing yourself back down to a level where you're not afraid to reach out to people and ask for help.
You mentioned those resources. You mentioned the tough transition. What's the toughest part? Is it the change of lifestyle, or is it, starting over in that experience you said of being a little bit older and kind of starting from the beginning?
Yeah, I think it's all of that. I think starting over, you're used to a certain lifestyle first and foremost. You're used to a certain routine. You're used to waking up, getting your breakfast, being in the locker room, getting your prehab, your activation, training, come in, get your treatment, post game meal, ice bath, all that stuff, and it kind of shifts on its head. And I think the biggest thing for me is just like, you didn't really have to think about, well, I won't say the biggest thing, but an important thing for me was, you didn't think about having to work out. It was just kind of part of the norm. Like, you were expected to stay in shape and be in shape. And nowadays I'm having to like work and find workout classes and make up my own workout routines. And it's like, it's a real struggle to stay in shape. I remember when I was playing and you'd see someone, someone that retired years ago, and you look at him and be like, wow, he kind of fell off a little bit. Like, he used to be the fittest person like on the team or like in the league, and then you realize like it's very hard and very slippery slope that you can lose that, because it's not part of your everyday routine. It's something that you really have to plan for now, instead of it being part of your job. That was one. And then to your point, just getting kind of humbled back down. Like, you're learning a whole new skill set for the most part, and a lot of players go from playing to maybe the competition side and the technical side, mm-hmm, whether that be coaching or scouting, whatever that may be. But there's still a learning curve for that. Like, you still have to get humbled and work your way back up. Very few players get a chance just to step in and be a head coach or step in to be a technical director or a sporting director. And you really have to kind of learn the ropes. So it's almost like being a rookie again, where the normal person coming out of college, you start that a 22 entry level job, then mid level job, and you work your way up. But as a professional athlete, you somewhat have to, you climb a ladder and then you get your ankles chopped off and you got to start that climb right back up again. So I think that was probably the most challenging part, just understanding how you have to kind of re-identify yourself.
Did anyone ever say you were too old to start something? Because I remember, one of the examples was Brandon Vincent, third pick in the draft, was a national team guy. And 2 years into his pro career, he retired so that he could work in the finance sector because he didn't want to be too far behind. Mm-hmm. Was that a conversation that people ever brought up to you?
I don't think it was a conversation people brought up to me. It's just something that I kind of recognized in myself, and just seeing experiences and having conversations with people. They wouldn't necessarily point it out, but you could kind of tell it was alluded to that. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the reason why a lot of players, when they're done playing, they just kind of I don't want to say stick, but for lack of a better word, kind of stick to the competition route, because it's not as there's a learning curve, don't get me wrong, but it's not as big of a leap as if you transition to something that's completely, novel in its own right, or go to the business side. You definitely have to, like, you already have that understanding of the game and you've developed, a bulk of those skills. It's just a matter of defining them and fine tuning them a bit. So I think that's a reason why a lot of players do stick to the competitive and technical side of the game. Because that learning curve isn't as steep, and it's not like you get knocked all the way back down, but you do get knocked down and humbled quite a bit. But if you're going into something completely different, you're definitely kind of starting back off at the bottom. And I won't say it's easy, but athletes have a lot of traits that help you ascend very rapidly. Mm-hmm. But it's a matter of putting in that work ahead of time and making sure you're grinding it out, and kind of putting your head down and doing what you have to do, just as you did when you were playing and you were an athlete and a young soccer player. You did everything you could to get to the position you were. Same thing goes for post-playing career as well.
You mentioned Jamil, and for people who don't know, he's running a player engagement portion of Major League Soccer that's new, and his background is in the NFL, and he's sort of done that for both the NFL and NCAA of helping athletes you get tools, figure out those ideas around what do you want to do when the sport stops and when you stop playing. What would you tell young athletes, or maybe what would you like to see, MLS and now I think the big thing is MLS Academy players have that maybe you didn't have back in your day?
Yeah, first from a competitive standpoint, I think that things are starting to be put in place. Just kind of a clear pathway, to the professional level. And obviously with MLS Next and MLS Next Pro, these are clear pathways that MLS is putting in place, so young players can see what it takes to get to the top, and they're having these engagements with professional players and professional clubs and professional coaches, kind of all in the same event, and right there in their local market. So I love what the league is doing from that regard. I also think there's tons of opportunity. I know, just within these, different sectors with MLS Next and MLS Next Pro and MLS, just providing opportunities for, not only for players to develop, like it's a player development pathway, but coaching development, referee development, diversity initiative development. All these things is how do we create different programming that really builds and grows, complete humans, right? Complete humans, and it looks after the complete pathway and not just the player pathway, but it really kind of encapsulates and brings everything together within one. And I think, the more we continue to do that, the more opportunities there will be for players like myself who played a while ago in the league and maybe looking to shift and be given different opportunities. It gives players a way to kind of dabble in a couple different arenas and really figure out where they want to land, what work they want to do post playing, whether that is on the competition and technical side, and from a scouting, been able to scout young players and bring them into the fold of MLS clubs and MLS academies, or just an accelerator program to help people identify what it's like to work on the business side of leagues, and giving them those experiences from whether it be an academy MLS Next Pro, and then moving up to MLS, you're able to see it, and you're able to grow and gradually build with the league instead of really just being thrown into the fire.
So you've mentioned a couple of times, for a lot of players, the next step is on that sporting side, whether it's in a coaching staff or front office or scouting or all those things. That's not the case for you. I mentioned your title at the top, Director of Business Operations at Charlotte FC. So what made you lean away from that? What did you see that made you want to go towards the marketing and then business side?
Yeah, for me, it was a matter of I wanted to stay involved with the sport. First and foremost, I think the sport it's continued to grow steadily. There's so much potential for the sport. It's a passion point of mine. The league's a passion point of mine. It gave me my opportunity to play at the professional rank. And so I have a passion and love for the sport and for the league. And so first and foremost is like, how do I get involved and stay involved, and how can I contribute to just the growth of the sport and the game, here in the United States. And so I wanted some stability in life as well. I wanted, I'd already experienced, the traveling, and being on the pitch day in and day out. And it's a wear and it's a grind. But I was like, how can I, just continue to push the game forward in a different regard? And also wanted to use my degree. I wanted to use, the degree, and, wanted to, all those hours I put into school, I wanted those to pan out for me as well. So how can I have the best of both worlds is really was my thinking. And so I gravitated towards the business side and just wanting to learn more about the commerciality of the league and the business side, and revenue generation of the league and the sport, which is something I've always found fascinating. And I think whatever route you decide to go, if you want to stay within the sport, I think you should learn both sides, both the sporting and the business side, because it just helps you learn the economics of the league and makes you understand the league from an inside out, and why some decisions are made, and the strategic approaches of the leadership. From a player standpoint, you may not understand, or when a decision is made, why things happen or shake out that way. But when you take a peek behind the curtain, you're like, okay, you may not agree with it, but you understand and can you can sympathize with why such and such decision was made.
I gotta ask, how often does someone find out you played in MLS? You know what I mean? Like, are you on calls and in conversations with people, and at some point it comes out like, yeah, I know about that. I played in this league.
Yeah, it happens very weird and randomly. Like it's funny. I want to get to the point where, well, I'll take a step back. Like a big piece of when you transition is just that identity standpoint, like who you identify yourself as. Like I've always identified myself as, Darrius Barnes, the soccer player. And then like right when I transitioned, it was like Darrius Barnes, the former MLS player, whatever it may be. So like I've tried, I really try intentionally to strip myself of that a little bit. So I'm more so looked at as, Darrius Barnes, the director of business operations, and kind of see things through that purview. Because if you always kind of hamper on the past and who you were, you're always going to see yourself in that light. And while that's a big part of who I am and who I was, it's kind of on to this next chapter, and want to be kind of viewed as on that ground. So I say all that to say, like I've been on calls, and like people will, they'll recognize that I used to play, or I bring up stats, or say they called one of my games. Right now I'm in the middle of interviewing for our broadcast talent and sideline reporter, and interviewed someone who said they called one of my games one time. So it's like little things like that kind of bring me back to the pitch. But I imagine in the next couple of years it'll start to fade away quite a bit.
Well, and then it'll transition to someone who helped one of the most successful expansion teams in MLS history. So let's get to North Carolina now. You are a Raleigh native. You are a North Carolina native. So I guess let's start with this, because most of the people listening to this show in Canada, in the US, maybe not from North Carolina. Give us the pitch. Give us an idea of the soccer landscape in this area.
Yeah, I mean, North Carolina and South Carolina is just such a soccer-rich region. I think we're very fortunate to be in the region that we are. I think we're very fortunate to have so much young talent within, like right within arm's reach of us. It's on our shoulders to really figure out how we engage and cultivate. And so really what we're right now doing is just like what is the best method and how do we prioritize just all these great clubs that we have, at our disposal. How can we make a mark? How can we help these clubs grow? It's not just about these clubs helping Charlotte FC get the best talent, but how do we put how do we relay our coaching foundation, our coaching curriculum, and pass that on so that we're helping these clubs grow and we're cultivating and developing the best players possible for the collective region. So I think for us, we're very lucky just to have, so much talent already at our disposal, but it's up to us, really how do we maximize that? And so, from our leadership down, it's super important, just the player development and pro player pathway and making sure these young boys that we bring into our academies are just well-rounded and that we're building complete human beings while also, developing, top level athletes and talent at the same time. And so, we've really put some of the pieces in place, whether it just be our academy director and Dan Locke and our technical director, Mark Nichols, our head coach of the first team, Miguel Ramirez is huge on player development and they're always present and they have touch points with all of our academy kids as well. So it's a very open door policy and transparent. And I think you'll start to see, and we'll start to see some of the fruits of that labor start to develop and show up in the first team here in the upcoming years.
Yeah, for anyone who doesn't know, Mark Nichols ran a very successful academy in the Carolina area for a number of years and then was out in Seattle running the academy that brought through Danny Leyva and Josh Atencio and all those players we've seen be successful for Seattle. I'm very excited to see what he does with you. So that's the player side. Give us the fan side now. What is Charlotte FC fan base going to look like? What's it going to sound like? Where are we going to see the colors? Like, give people an idea of what you're hoping this region will be.
Yeah, I think for us, we just really want to unite the region and bring the region together. Like we're not a club just for Charlotte. While our name may be rooted in Charlotte, we're a club for all of the Carolinas, and we're trying to show up in all these markets, whether it's Charlotte, Greensboro, Raleigh, Greenville, South Carolina, Asheville, North Carolina, Columbia. We're trying to paint the Carolinas blue. And so I think we've done that in a number of our marketing and media efforts, just showing these communities that we're here for them. I think that's the main part about building a club is just first and foremost just getting involved in the community. When you show communities that you care, you're giving back. I think the communities just in turn support what you're trying to do and the initiatives that you're looking to do. So our fans have been fantastic just in terms of supporting a lot of community initiatives that we've had. We have an initiative, our mini pitches, 22 mini pitches that we're trying to build throughout the Carolina region over the next few years, and making sure that we're engaging with local community captains to help program those as well, local leaders. We're combating food insecurity. At the same time, we have military initiatives. So I think all these initiatives that we have as a club and that we're building and growing, we continue to engage with different fans and constituents of these communities, which we hope turns into Charlotte FC fans. We want that stadium to be packed with blue and white. Our first game we're looking to get 74,000 fans and break Atlanta's record for an MLS match. So I encourage everyone to come, but other than that, we're trying to average 30,000 fans at the stadium and really make Bank of America Stadium a fortress in the Carolina region and just really put soccer in the Carolinas on the map.
So I know obviously you've been around the league for a while, but also in this role, I know you've been waiting and researching for this moment. You've talked to a lot of the other expansion teams. You've watched a lot of the other expansion processes. What are some of the keys that you've kind of locked in on that have been successful other places that you think are musts for an expansion team, or maybe you're trying to not co-op, but use to help you guys hit the ground running?
Yeah, I think for one, it's just being intentional about what we're doing. Like you said, we've had plenty of conversations with other expansion teams and seeing what they've tried to do. But I think for us is we've really just tried to look at things through our own lens at the same time. If you look at what we did from an expansion draft standpoint, we really wanted to we had the advantage of being the only team, selecting an expansion draft this year. So how can we make a moment out of that? How can we make that something that's exciting for our fan base, and more centric to Charlotte? And we televise that live and broadcast that live with our in tandem with our local broadcast partner WSOC and Telemundo. And we're able to shoot both English language and Spanish language live version of the expansion draft. So I think it's for us is just trying to think out of the box and how do we leverage some league platforms and league events and league moments and leverage these once in a lifetime moments that we have as a club to really capitalize on that, and really bring fans into the fold and show them that we're going to be transparent. We're going to be as accessible as possible, and we're trying to do things different and do things in a different way. And I think you'll see that with a lot of things that we unravel here in the first year. One just being our broadcast experience and broadcast production, just looking to have different, tech and innovative integrations into how we're, having the game viewed to our fans who aren't able to be there in stadium. So there's different things that we'll do and unfold throughout the year that I think are going to be new, and novel to the league.
Would it be fair for me to ask, for a comparison for us of maybe what type of market Charlotte will be? Like when Nashville came in, they said we're not LAFC, right? They're different cities, they're different markets, they're different styles. Do you have an idea of maybe a similar market, or as you said, you want to be new and innovative? I don't want to tie you to anyone that you don't want to be tied to.
Yeah, I think that's exactly it. We want to be our own. We want to be new. I mean, I think people will automatically, they'll connect us to the southern cities, your Atlantas, your Nashvilles, of the world. But I think we're all different. Charlotte is such a unique city. It's a changing and growing city, every single day. The Charlotte of 10, 15 years ago is not the Charlotte of today, and won't be the Charlotte of the next 10, 15, 20 years as well. So I think we're going to continue to evolve. I think, I think having this lead time and runway up into our inaugural season has been, a benefit. Obviously, hasn't been great dealing with COVID, and trying to launch a team kind of in the middle, back in, beginning. I don't know where we are with COVID right now, but it hasn't been the easiest thing. But I think there's been a lot of lessons that we've been able to take from that, and that's just just learning our fan base, learning, getting invested and involved in our community. And I think if we do things the way that we know how and the way that we've kind of strategized, I think the fans are going to enjoy what we're doing from a like I said, from a community engagement, from a match day experience standpoint, from a broadcast standpoint. So I think for us, we're just trying to be the best Charlotte FC that we can be, and I'll leave it to everyone else to compare who we are once the ball rolls out to the pitch.
How important is it though for a club to have those rivals, to have Nashville and Atlanta, to have not just the comparison, but I mean, we both lived in New York. For the Red Bulls, NYCFC was a great moment for them to have that meaningful match. How important is it to sort of have that already in place?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important, but for me, it's right now, it's just a geographical, quote unquote rivalry. Like I can't say that it's a rivalry yet because we haven't stepped foot on the field. I think rivalries are going to organically play out. I think it's good to have that marquee moment, and hopefully that's one that a lot of fans have their eyes on and are tuned in on. When that match rolls around. But I think rivalries are created on the pitch, and once those develop organically, I think that the geographical component of it is definitely going to help. But those battles are going to take place on the field, and then we continue to pull levers from there, whether it be from a local club standpoint or from a league standpoint. But I'm a big believer that rivalries are created on the pitch.
So you're ready for the random SKC or RSL Charlotte rivalry when that comes through, right? Because you never know.
You don't. I mean, when I was in New England, they said Chicago was a rival, but that's because there had been some testy matches and some feisty matches that have taken place. So that's exactly what I mean, though. That was created on the pitch, and that was kind of a natural one. And I wouldn't necessarily say it's a rivalry now, but for a good maybe 4 or 5 year stint, it was just because of what it transpired on the pitch, and meeting in the playoffs. All those circumstances have to really align to create a rivalry, and so I imagine they will. Just what how often we'll play some of those teams, but TBD.
Patrick Niarco, a legend, by the way, when you're talking about those Chicago Fire teams, some great teams. So for you, you had the jersey launch. You mentioned the expansion draft where you guys were able to build around that moment. Obviously, the launch coming up and into the season. What's like a little moment that you're excited about, or what's something that you can't wait to unveil for kind of everyone to see? Like what's your moment that you're building towards?
I mean, the moment we're building towards is March 5th. March 5th, Bank of America Stadium on
It's on the
Fox.
top of your head. You've got it memorized?
Exactly. It is on the top of my head. That's the one it can't get here soon enough, and it also couldn't be further away. It's kind of in that it's in that sweet spot right now. But that's kind of the pinnacle for us from a club, just hosting our first home match. But then, our first match as a club on February 26th against DC as well. Like, I think those moments are going to be amazing for the club, just because, we're starting to see, like, it's just we've have tangible items. We have a kit. We're starting to fill out a roster. We have some of these tangible things that make the club feel more real, where a couple weeks or a couple months ago, it's kind of it was a fairy tale. It's like we existed but didn't exist. And, now we've launched a website. We're on the MLS website now. So we're starting to feel more real, and things are coming together. And I just think it's going to be fantastic just to see, so everyone can see and witness, all the hard work that's been done, behind the scenes from a sporting standpoint, from a marketing standpoint, from a comms, from a media standpoint, to really get to this point. And it's going to be cool just to see kind of January 1st, everyone flips the switch. We're in 2022, and then Charlotte FC kicks off 2022 as well. So I think that's really the moment that, everyone internally really can't wait for. Obviously, we're going to have our first preseason coming up. We still have some more players to sign, but all that, the North Star for us is February 26th and March 5th.
I'm excited for it. 74,000 in a stadium. I think both of us would have, kind of been shocked if you told us that a few years back about that's where MLS would stand. And now another expansion team, another fan base, and we think another great club in MLS. Darrius Barnes, Director of Business Operations for Charlotte FC. Darrius, good luck, man. We know you're grinding hard behind the scenes, and we're excited to see it all come together.
Dave, appreciate it, man. Always a pleasure.